let's do something that I can manage, hopefully without reading the rules. And you can see my poor Titan is in very bad shape. That's what we're covering here. Titan's kind of a weird game. I say that about a lot of games. The map in Titan is not a representation of terrain in a standard kind of map. It's more this weird sort of random movement abstraction, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The goal of the game is to wipe out all the other players. Pretty simple. You're going to start off with a fairly limited amount of stuff. Three of the basic type of critters. Your Titan, whom if he dies, you lose. And an angel who will help command your forces. At the beginning of the game, you're going to have to split your units. Well, at the beginning of the game, everybody rolls the die. And after some sort of annoying pairing off option, essentially, each person is assigned a number from 1 to 6. The person at 6 has that tower as his location. And what he's going to do, and everybody does, and they all take a number based on their tower, but the person at 6 will be going first, is secretly split their pieces so that they're in equal stacks, and the Titan and the angel that he gets are in 2 separate stacks. So, you could, somewhat naively, put one of each critter in here and an angel. And you flip them face down, put this on here, and then they're stacked on the space in such a way as you can distinguish that there's more than one stack there. That's the initial part of the game in terms of setup. And then each person does this. Now, you probably don't want to stack them one critter of each type in each, because those creatures are key to forming your forces over the game. I mean, they start out as your forces, but they reproduce using these charts here where, well, one creature can always get its own kind in the right kind of terrain, but often it takes more than one to get the kind. So for example, here in the marsh, an ogre could take an ogre, but 2 ogres can get you the next level up a troll. And what's kind of interesting here is ogres also reproduce in the hills. If you have 3 of them, you can produce a minotaur. And then if you have 2 minotaurs, you can get a unicorn, or 2 trolls, you can get a ranger. And some of the creatures cross over after they get to higher terrain. So like rangers appear in both the plains and marsh. And you have a lot of this kind of interweaving of the different different creature lines. The creatures have two values on them: a strength value and a movement point value. Well, skill factor value actually, because the skill factor is going to affect how likely you are to hit the enemy, whereas the strength is going to be how many dice you get to roll to hit them. Those are all used on these little battle boards, which are just little tactical representations of the spaces on the board. When you meet somebody in a space on the board, you're going to fight out on here. All right, so for the actual play of the game, on your turn you roll a die. Now on the first turn of the game, if you don't like your die roll, you can re-roll it. That die roll is going to determine your movement. You need not move unless your stacked has split, or if you have 2 stacks basically in one space, like you do at the beginning of the game. Movement follows a few basic rules. Let us start with kind of the simplest up here in the mountains. It's got this little thing here, and we'll also see these down at the bottom. This little square indicator going down, that says you get flushed down that way. So your first move is going to have to be straight down, and that keeps you from being able to wander around here, which would be particularly rich and easy to gain gain critters if you were able to do that. We have another similar symbol, which is on the other side of that, this kind of U-shaped thing. and that's also over here. That says if you start here, you have the option of going up. Likewise here. If you don't start in that space, though, you don't have the option of moving up through it. Likewise, I think if you don't start here, you can't follow this down. So if you go up into here, you have to keep whipping around. You can't just drop right down. But once you start here, you get flushed immediately. These triple arrows say you must follow that direction if you're already moving. So, on a roll of 5, if I'm here, if I want to move, I must go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or I can just sit there. If I move, I'll be allowed to muster. I'll be allowed to get more critters in the space that I go to. We have another symbol that's of some importance, which is this little jagged thing here. Now, towers and the jagged things here are different. If you start in a tower, you may go in any direction out of it. If you start up here, you must be flushed, so you ignore those jaggeds. So these are options. These are also options in the sense that if somehow, and the only way you can get into a tower is by being next to one through normal movement, you move into a tower, you can choose to go out through either of the other directions. Likewise here, if you go up here, you can choose to go this way or this way. But once you go that way, you must keep following the direction that you went. That actually covers all of the movement. However, internalizing what all the different options are as you play through it is kind of tough to do. The key thing here is once you start moving, once you take your first action, usually all your decisions are made. Except for in the one case where you're going into a tower, or here where you have options based on which direction you want to come out of that space on, if you have continuing movement rolls. If you step on someone else's stack during your movement, you stop, and there might be a battle. I think that's it. There are some special kinds of movement that can happen where you get to teleport. We'll get to that a little later. All right, we'll get to it now. All right. If you have a stack in a tower and you have a lord, lords consist of the Titan, the angel, and then there's another creature, the archangel, which isn't aligned to a color particularly, but that doesn't really matter. The angels don't need to be either. You can use someone else's angels if you need to. Then if you roll a 6, you're allowed to do tower teleportation. And your options there are you can teleport from that tower to a vacant tower anywhere on the board, or to a vacant land up to 6 away from you. Now vacant's important here because it means, okay, you'll get to muster, you'll get to create creatures there, but you won't be able to slam into somebody and attack from a tower. Once you kill enough units, you'll get score. Once you kill units, you get some sort of scoring. Once you get 400 points of scoring, that means your Titan will be factor 10 or higher. You're allowed to do Titan teleportations. Now, to do the tower teleportation, you have to show the Lord. So you either show your Titan or your angel or archangel when you want to take that action. If you want to do Titan teleportation, you're going to have to show your Titan. Now, this is important because keeping these things hidden, keeping the contents of your stacks hidden, is a part of the play and an advantage. So if you do the Titan teleportation, you can jump to any land on the board that contains another player's legion on a roll of a 6, and then you get to fight it. You may not jump to a vacant space, and you must show your Titan. Okay. These are always optional. You can always do normal movement or no movement at all. There is one other restriction on the movement. You must move one of your stacks. That can be a big deal because you might be in a situation where all of your stacks are stuck behind someone else, and you'll have to attack them, maybe not to your advantage. You also must move one stack at least out of a region where you've split your stacks, and you're considered to have split your stacks at the beginning of the game. All right. If you end up in the space with somebody else, either because you walked through them or you Titan teleported on them, you take the terrain of that matches that space. For example, this will match any jungle. The terrain is going to be aligned by taking the word here and aligning it with the number here. So then if I say entered from here, I would be attacking from this side, and the defender will be defending along this side. In the very simplest version, the planes have no terrain at all. Now I gotta be kind of careful here because there are some subtleties to the combat that I probably don't remember terribly well. So let's take a look. The first thing that happens is both players look at the other person's pieces. And does everybody get to do this? I think everybody gets to see them. I'm not positive about that. So the mover picks which places he wants to attack first. They secretly look at each other's stacks. And the defender has the right at that point to immediately flee. If he flees the battle, and he can't do this if he has a lord in his stack, I believe. Yeah. The attacker will take no losses, but he only gets half the points added to the score when the defender flees. The two players can also negotiate an agreement, basically saying, hey, if we fought this out, this is what would probably happen. This can include losses, including mutual elimination, but it can't involve any other stacks on the board. And it can involve promises, but those are not binding. And obviously you can negotiate at other times in the game if that's the case, I would say. Agreements can't involve awarding points that's greater than the value of all the characters in the legion that's eliminated. One of the legions has to be eliminated. If it's a mutual elimination, neither side is eliminated. Gets points. Unless the defender flees, either player can insist, we're going to fight this out. We're not going to negotiate it. And I almost never see negotiations. You always feel like you have a chance at something better. But I could see both sides wanting to limit their risk in a situation. After this, at any point during the battle, you may concede the engagement. Only one player can concede, therefore ending the engagement. The conceding player's legion is completely eliminated. The victor's legion suffers no further losses. Full value is given for the characters, but here's what's cool. You can't do this if it's going to... Oh, you can do it if it's going to eliminate you from the game. One reason to do this is obviously the same as negotiated, hey, let's just not fight the battle, this will be easier. But the main reason you do this is to prevent the attacker from taking losses that might give him an advantage in summoning an angel or something like that. You can concede the battle before, or might prevent him from getting a muster because he's got a full 7-unit stack, and you just don't want to give him that. Chances are you'd flee instead, but whatever. All right. So when you actually fight the battle, as I said, you come in on the side based from where the alignment of the board and the battlefield takes place. And if it's Titan teleportation, The attacker can enter from his choice of sides, as long as it's got 4 areas on it, except for the tower, which he always enters from a particular side. Now, the defender comes in opposite, and he gets his maneuver first. There's going to be a turn record track where the defender places his marker here, and if it could be the one from the unit being attacked. And before each of his movement phases, other than the first one, it moves forward a space. If the defender is not destroyed by the time he would get an 8th movement, he's won, and the attacker is completely eliminated at that point. And all points are awarded to the defender. All right, I am missing, oh, here we go, maneuver phase. Okay, so first you're going to have a maneuver and then a strike phase in each round of combat. Each of the turns marked here. During the maneuver phase, you can move your own units on the battlefield. Only your own movement units, annoyingly repetitive rules, but on your first maneuver phase, you first enter the correct side of entry. So say I'm coming in from here, 1. So that's my first movement point. And I can move as far as my skill factor. I can run by opposing units. So you use facing to determine who owns what. So this could go 1, 2, 3, 4. But once it starts a maneuver phase adjacent to an enemy unit, it's not allowed to move. It's engaged in combat. There are also going to be terrain effects. We'll go over them in a moment. You can't move through through anybody's pieces unless you're a flying unit. Certain things fly, like angels with the star here indicates flying, so he could go 1, 2, 3, 4 as an example. All right. During the strike phase, both players attack with all of their characters that begin that phase in contact with enemy characters adjacent to them. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a comparison of skill factors. The attacker's skill factor versus the defender's skill factor. And that'll give you a number that you need to hit on dice. You roll a number of dice equal to the strength of the unit or units attacking. These get assigned in order. So I can swing this centaur and roll 3 dice against this ogre, and then I choose where to attack with the angel. There are some additions to that, though. For each hit, we're going to put a damage marker on them, and they go up to the numbers. If the hits are totally exceed the strength of the enemy unit that you hit, or they equal it, that unit's dead. Now, if it hasn't swung yet in this strike phase, it gets flipped over to indicate it's dead, but it's going to get a counter strike. If it's the attacker's piece and it's already struck, you can just remove it from the board at that point and put it in the dead pile. You've got to keep separate dead piles for the 2 players because what you kill is how you get points. All right. If you happen to do more damage to something than it can take, for example, if this ogre throws 6 dice at the centaur, well, an attacker skill of 2 against the defender skill of 4 means I need 6s. Let's say I roll 6 6s. Well, 3 of the hits is enough to kill the centaur. The other 3 can then go to another critter of the same or lower skill factor that I'm adjacent to. I'm allowed, say I was attacking instead this gargoyle, I'd be allowed to try to attack the gargoyle, but looking for a strike factor that would hit the angel. Just in case I get overage, I could hit the angel with that. Sometimes you want to do something like that. Because otherwise, any hits on the gargoyle couldn't translate upward to the angel, who has a higher skill factor. Some of the terrain is going to affect your strike and skill factors and stuff like that. So you might get more dice, you might get a bonus, you might get a penalty. Usually it's a penalty for you. And we'll go over those perhaps a little later. All right, range striking. During the strike phase, you just completed your movement, you're allowed to do range strikes. The defending player can't range strike. The defending as in the guy who didn't just move. Okay, so the phasing player gets to range strike, it's not the attacker and defender, which are different defined things. In order to range strike, you need a type of character the game doesn't start with, a type of thing the game doesn't start with, monster. One with a lightning bolt on it. All right. So you're not allowed to range strike, and you probably wouldn't want to if you're adjacent to an enemy piece. The distance that you're allowed to range strike is going to be your skill factor, but it's counted including both the attacker, the striker's hex, and the target hex. So you need at least a skill factor of 3 to even have a range strike, and there's nothing that has a range strike with a skill factor of 2. So let's say this guy had a range strike on him, or let's look at this guy. We'll put him bag and all here in this hex. He has a 4 skill factor, so 1, 2, 3, 4. He can barely reach here. Now, if you're firing at range 4, your skill factor is reduced by 1 in order to make the range strike, just for the die roll comparison. So in that case, I would be rolling as if I had a skill factor 3 against 2, which means I would need 3s or higher. I also only get half as many dice as I would in a normal strike. Lords are immune to range strikes from everything except the Warlock character. The Warlock here. The Warlock has another special ability. His range doesn't get decreased. His skill factor doesn't get decreased due to range. All right. Reinforcements. The defender is allowed to add a reinforcement to his legion by mustering a character at the beginning of his 4th maneuver phase. Basically, what he has on the board that's alive, if it's able to do a muster, and we'll explain mustering later, but remember I kind of briefly went into it, hey, 2 ogres could get a troll. Well, if I have 2 ogres on the field in the marsh, I could bring a troll in as a reinforcement. If I only had 1 ogre, I could bring an ogre in. You don't have to do this. It comes on your defender's side, from the side the defender entered. And if you don't take it on the 4th turn, you forfeit the right to do so again. You may not want to take it because it adds to your point value. And it also adds to your chance of surviving. You can't muster a reinforcement if you have 7 characters in it. That's the stacking limit. No stack can ever, no single legion can ever have more than 7 critters in it. If the defender wins an engagement by agreement or an attacker concession after the characters are committed to the battlefield, the defender will still get his reinforcement as long as he's qualified to do so. This could be a part of the concession, though, I believe, which is to say, okay, I'll kill your critters, but I won't get a reinforcement. Anyway. The attacker has his own special way of bringing troops in. He may summon an angel. Now, his restrictions for that are pretty well defined, shall we say. He can only summon an angel during his first maneuver phase following the first strike phase in which one or more defenders' characters are slain. To summon an angel, you have to have one somewhere else on the board. You have to meet those qualifications. You have to have less than 7 pieces in your attacking force at that point. And then you can bring the angel in on your side. He comes from the other stack and just comes over here and starts helping the battle. That can be a tremendous advantage in an attack. But you only have one time in any given battle where you can summon an angel, and I think you can only summon each angel once in a turn. You can summon the angel after the battle, though. If the attacker goes on to win, he may then summon the angel after battle. And that's even if you pass up the option. I didn't realize that. You can summon on a concession. You cannot summon on a flee. Only one angel can be summoned by a player during the entire engagement phase. So only one of your battles can involve a summoned angel. That can be a big deal. So there's less so you can get multiple angels in the game. You start with one, but as you get certain point scores, you get additional angels. And it seems like this huge advantage, and it kind of is because they provide you with the defensive edge, but you can only summon one of them per attack, per a turn that you take. All right. If somebody wins the battle by eliminating the other person and they survive by eliminating the other person's critters, they're going to get a score equal to the strength times the skill factor of each critter that they kill of the opponent. Their own critters dead don't count for this. If it's a flee, it's only half the score. This will be kept track of on paper. If your score exceeds a multiple of 100 points, you may add an angel to the legion that won that engagement. You only get one? That's a little fuzzy. It looks like you might be able to add more than one angel per time. That's how we used to play it. A legion may not add an angel if it's overstacked, or if there are no angels available in the caretaker's stacks. Okay, what that means is you can take anybody's colored angel. Preferably you'll take your own first. So you're only limited to there's 12 angels in the game. Or actually, no, sorry, 18 angels in the game, right? Should be 18. Yeah. There's 18 angels in the game. You can't have one if they're all on the board. If a player's score attains a multiple of 500, you take an archangel instead of an angel. But you may take an angel if there are no archangels. These show the same way as his angels. They can be... they're bigger. 9/4, still flying. They can do tower teleportation. They can be called into a stack, just like an angel. They're just more powerful. Like angels, archangels don't die forever. There's a few pieces that are, when eliminated, they come back and are available to be summoned again. I think the wizard, guardian, the demi-lords over here. Right? Where are they? Okay, there they are. The Guardian and Warlock are also, there's an infinite number. Well, they can come back after being dead. But all the other critters, when they die, they go in the bag and they're gone. All right, what about mustering? When you move, and also if you're the defender in the battle at the right time, but when you move, you have to actually have moved. You may muster from a stack, and that's pretty simple. You look at the terrain that you're in, and you look to see if you have any of the critters listed for that terrain. So in the brush, gargoyles, cyclopses, and gorgons are the only things that can muster there. If I have one of these critters, I can muster another of the same type, or anything lower, or if I have the proper number, I can get the level higher. So if I have 2 gargoyles, I can get a cyclops. If I have 2 cyclopses, I can get a gorgon. In a tower, it's a little different. If you're in a tower, you can always muster a centaur, gargoyle, or ogre. You don't have to show anything. So when I'm in one of these, if I say I have a gargoyle, I want another gargoyle, you can insist on seeing that. In fact, it's expected that you show them, but that can be kind of annoying at times. Anyway, it's just a matter of trust there in that case. We've got 2 other kinds of critters, the Demilords, the Guardian, and the Warlock. For the Guardian, if you show 3 critters of any one type, you get a Guardian. Or you could, of course, show a Guardian and get a Guardian. Likewise, with the Warlock, if you show your Titan, you get a Warlock. Or if you show a Warlock, you can get another Warlock. Both of those are interesting critters. The Guardian's a big flying mass of dice. The Warlock has, though, these cool range strike abilities. He can shoot lords, and range doesn't affect him. I think terrain doesn't either. Anyway. What about the Titan? All right. So the Titan starts out with a strength of 6. There's an X here. That's because for every 100 points above 6 that you are, you get a +1 to your Titan's strength. That means more dice, more hit points it takes to kill. You also get bonuses. Once you get 400 points, you get the tower teleportation. But if your Titan's killed in battle, you get to strike back. But after that, you've lost the game. Any characters on the board that were still alive, including on the battle board, after the Titan's eliminated, are put aside, and they're not going to count towards the score of this battle. The score of the battle is going to be computed, including the value of the Titan at that point, and added to the player's running total. You might get some angels off this. Then, all the remaining points, all the remaining legions and whatever forces were still left at the end of that round of battle are added together for score. This includes ones that would be involved in another engagement. And you get half the points to the person who just killed the Titan. These will not generate any angels. And that's important because where would the angels go? And they could be a huge amount of points. But they do add to the Titan's power. So it's like his entire army has just fled in your advantage. You also get all his legion markers. That can be important because that's another limited number. You have 12 legion markers in the board. That means 12 stacks maximum. If you take players out, you get more piles of of stacks, so you can kind of dominate the board in this weird sort of way. Like I said, the movement on the board is kind of weird, but there are ways of blocking people, getting them stuck places, etc. And remember, people have to. A player has to move a stack if he, no matter what, each turn. You might have to attack something. There, I think, are situations where you cannot move because you can't land on your own stack. All right. And we have some shortened games which involve reducing, either just cutting the time, and basically you score the game by comparing points. They kind of feel a little unsatisfactory because there's basically 2 paths to the main game. One is build up lots of stuff, and the other is winning battles and building your Titan up to be powerful. And both have their advantages. All right, let's talk a little bit about the special advantages, the special terrain. The plains are just clear. They make up most of the terrain in the game. So here, this is plain. And they have no real effects. Trees. Non-flying creatures can't move through trees. Flying creatures can't end in them. Range strikes cannot go through these hexes, except for the wizard, who is ignored. He ignores terrain for range strike. Brambles, that's this stuff. This stuff's really good to defend in. Okay, if you're native in it, Gargoyle, Cyclops, Gorgon, Behemoth, Serpent, you'll be slowed. That means it takes you 2 of your skill factors to move into that. A native defending in the Brambles has its strike number increased by 1 if attacked by a non-native character. A native character striking out of the a non-native character striking out of the Bramble has its skill factor reduced by 1. Okay. So, if you're native and attacked by a non-native and you're sitting in this, you get a defensive bonus on the die, on the number needed to hit on the die. If you're attacking out of it and you're not native to it, you get a penalty regardless of what you're attacking. And on range striking, a native character defending in the Bramble has its strike number increased by, needed to hit it increased by 1 when it's the target of a range strike. A non-native range striker loses a skill factor for each intervening hex containing Brambles. If the Bramble's in the range striker's hex, it has no effect. I'm not going to worry too much about the rest of the terrain. I'm just kind of showing you a couple of them. When we enter a battle, I'll go over the terrains if they're different, but that covers one of the major terrain types, actually 2 of them, the jungle and the brush, which are the terrain types that the gargoyles, cyclops, behemoths, etc. are in. We do have some other things that are significantly different, though, like marsh. Well, I'll go over these briefly. Marsh, the bogs, nothing can move through them except natives. So it becomes these nasty bottlenecks there. Swamp, same effect there. It's got the bogs in them. The hills, the slopes, I believe, add dice to native creatures attacking down them. And I think attacking up them gives you a skill factor penalty. And they also block line of sight. You can't shoot through something that's got a hill above it, which makes sense. The mountain is like a hill. It has these cliffs. These are, you can't attack over them. They're impassable. They also have a range strike effect, which we'll worry about, but they affect kind of a line of sight aspect. And then there's the volcano itself, where the dragon is the only thing that can sit in that, and he gets bonuses for being in it. The dragon's not the toughest critter on the board. The desert, the sand slows movement, but that's it. And then here we have cliffs. These are dunes. Dunes are kind of like slopes, but they work a little different. In that they add dice to the attacker if he's native coming down them. But they add, I think, more dice than a slope does. Woods is just some trees. And then the tundra has this frozen stuff, drifts, which slows movement and does damage to non-natives. So you have a bunch of different, types of terrain to fight in. And clearly, there's a few factors to that terrain that give advantages. One is the actual terrain is advantageous to the natives. So like the brambles are really, really good for the jungle junk and the brush bruja. Whereas some of the terrain, like the plains, doesn't really help the things that live there because there's no terrain there. But the other thing is, if you can survive to the fourth turn in the battle, if you're native, you probably can get a muster. Now, musters are, like I implied, but I didn't specifically say, limited by the countermix. And that countermix is one use only for the most part, with the exception of the lords and demi-lords. So if all the ogres are gone, you ain't mustering another ogre. And certain things can run out much more easily than others. Now there's a problem here, which is that I probably am missing some pieces, but that's okay. It's fair to everyone, right? It may actually tilt some of the factors. It may actually tilt some of the balance of some of the critter choices, but it's not going to be that big a deal. All right. One more little side note here. This is the only game that I can remember rolling 40 dice at once in. Legitimately. Like I had an attack where 40 dice, all same value, all looking for 5s or 6s or something like that. I had to fill my pith helmet with dice. And it's one of the few reasons I can justify like having a whole bag of 6-sided dice. I mean, how many games do you need that for? I've probably got like 100 dice in there, but I needed 40 of them once. All right, up it goes.